Hi everyone of History Respawned. On today's episode, John Harney and I are going to be doing a little co-op play for Wolfenstein Youngblood, which is a game in the new Wolfenstein series by Machine Games. And this game came out in midsummer, and John has been playing it. He is, as you can see here, level 19. Hey, John.
Yeah, it's because you look so
Hey there.
cool in that suit.
And I am unfortunately level 0. So we are going to be kind of relying on John to do most of the heavy lifting here. And also kind of explaining the world of Wolfenstein Youngblood, which is set in Machine Games' alternate history of the 20th century. And the game year, I think, is 1980. So, John, tell me a little bit about this game.
So, it's a very co-op game, I guess. How I describe it, like it's clearly built from the ground up to be co-op, which is kind of interesting. I think for our purposes, especially, the tone of the game is very interesting, and so at this point, people watching might have heard about this already, or if they played the game yourself, you know. But these two women are BJ's daughters, the twin daughters of BJ and his wife, and you. Basically, he's gone missing and nobody knows where he is. And we stole, along with Grace's daughter from the second game, we stole a helicopter from the FBI, because Grace is head of the FBI now, and came over to France to try and find Dad.
Nice.
And along the way, we've made friends with the French resistance, who are still going strong. And so right here, this is the catacombs. And so we are hanging out in this is the French resistance space. And it's kind of an open world game-ish. It's like a semi-open world game, and so this is the center base that you run away from outside. You know, and this gentleman here I don't know much about yet. He is apparently a fan of the Soviet Union. Not clear what their deal is actually in Machine Games world. So if we head around here. So we have Penda Nyang here, and I've already said yes in my game to a side mission she gives out.
Okay.
So all these NPCs are little side missions, and he's already given us a side mission as well. I think it's to kill somebody or something like that. So the NPCs are giving you these missions. We'll run up here. Where am I going? We'll run up the stairs. And Grace's daughter is upstairs, and she's in charge of intelligence. So she's doing kind of Destiny-style weekly challenges and things like that. You can get from her if you want.
Okay.
And at this point, I'm further in the game than you, Bob, but I'm not that far in the game, so this is kind of, maybe 10 or so hours into the game, and basically this is what the game is, if you know what I mean. Like the first few hours of the game, you're kind of unlocking stuff and figuring stuff out. Now we're kind of in the meat of the game, I think, is the impression I have.
Gotcha.
So here we have a lady here working away, doing her work on power armor. Abby Walker, this is Abby, she's Grace's daughter. And so you can hear the music. The soundtrack is very pseudo-80s. Mm-hmm. And the computers are very 80s, so they're working on all these things. And if we cross over here, there's actually a mechanic in the game where you can find floppy disks. And when you find one, you come over here to a floppy terminal, you insert it. And in the game, it's very, very Wolfenstein. Mm-hmm. So for example, it'll give you the code to open a door. Mm-hmm. And I'll also do like little micro diaries of kind of two NPCs talking about stuff, and little kind of environmental storytelling kind of thing. So that's so that's it. And if you keep your eyes open now, you'll see posters and things like this, and lots of very kind of early 80s design, like films and ads for microwaves and all that kind of stuff.
Neat. Yeah. Well, so that kind of falls in line.
Really well.
Yeah, and that kind of falls in line with the previous Wolfenstein games from Machine Games, where they had one set in the early 60s, and then I think the last game was set in the late 60s, early 70s, and then this game is set in the 80s. And all of those games have kind of had those kind of area touches with kind of a Nazi spin on them, I guess you could say.
Right, exactly. And we venture out into the city now, and then in the city, and this is something actually in fairness that's quite interesting, and I'm kind of curious about as I get further through the game, because, they're playing the 80s style music here in the resistance camp, and, there's more techno over here, and we'll get out into the city and we'll see some of the visual markers, but it's also very Nazi-ish. I remember, I really liked that about the first game, actually, and you did an episode, of course, with 2 guests, I think, in that game, and this idea of, like, Spears Berlin being realized. Mm-hmm. So we'll see that a similar thing's happening in France, and there's lots of, prisons and you know, they're going for that kind of long-term occupied vibe, you know.
So
and then the way you,
I
yeah,
found
go on, sorry.
what it's a stand-in for a VHS. It's called a UVK, and it's a UVK cover for a movie called Pink Mist, which I think is supposed to be an alternate history version of Purple Rain. So this is a pretty incredible item.
I just think, and you know, yeah, I guess you wouldn't have much of them yet, Bob. But like, you know, you go to your, you press your, what is that called? The large button in the middle of a PS4
Yes.
controller.
Yeah.
And the collectibles. You're collecting floppy disks. You're collecting cassette tapes, 3D glasses, and UVK covers. So if you go to your collectibles menu right now, you'll see. I also have one UVK tape. Der Golem is my one.
Okay. Yeah, I can see that one in
Yeah.
the cover for the collectibles section.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of that stuff is kind of peripheral and kind of cool. They must have had a ball, you know, working on all that.
Yeah.
And yeah, and then so you venture out into the city then, and then once you venture out into the city, there's very specific kind of co-op mechanics. But these are the machine games you know and probably love. Machine games game. Depending how you feel about the difficulty spike at the beginning of New Colossus, this has a little bit of that kind of vibe as well. And so then you use the metro to travel. So in fact, why don't you click on it, because I'm sure it'll show you the same options it would show me, whereas otherwise it will just ask you if you want to go with me.
Yeah,
And
I've
you'll
got
see, yeah.
a lot of options here.
Yeah, and so you'll see if you press into one of the locations for details that it will show you, oh, this is a mission that's available to you right now. And there's Brother 1, Brother 2, and Brother 3, and these are large kind of, these are the kind of the large mid-game enemies that you need to defeat in order to unlock the kind of the next phase of the game. And they're all kind of this massive, I'm trying to remember now because actually I haven't picked the game in a couple of weeks, so these massive kind of, I think at least one of them is actually a flat-out supercomputer. And they are just kind of these Nazi forces securing the city.
Interesting.
And so we can do anything you want, honestly. I mean, you can go to the riverside and we can run around there. Like the game, you know, even when you do pick an area that has the mission in it, you're effectively running around and shooting Nazis, and then they respawn and you shoot them again, and so on and so on. If you want to just kind of hang out and grind and get your levels up, you can do that in this game.
Interesting. So I don't know if it does it for you, but on my map, like say for instance for Little Berlin, it has got Claude the Armorer with a skull next to it, which is usually a sign that maybe that's not something I can do, or it would be ill-advised for me to try.
So this is where we're about to find out what happens with the level difference, because I think all the
let's find that out. I'm curious. So you pick a place to go, and then I'll go with you.
Okay, let's do it. Let me see, what have we got? We've got Claude the Armorer. See, I'm getting 20. So why don't we? Let me see. Let's go to Victory Boulevard.
Okay.
And we'll have a look around.
Okay.
And see how we do. And then but it is nice. So you see these. We just opened this crate together.
Oh, neat little introduction here.
Yeah.
Riot here 4 years ago. This is where Jacques got his facial scars, and many
poor Jacques.
resistance fighters
I know.
lost their lives. Now it is just a cold, dead place of steel and concrete. So, good luck, girls.
And so we just opened a crate together earlier, and that unlocked our third shared life. So basically, if one of us goes down, the other needs to revive us. And then if you both go down, you lose one of your shared lives and go back to the last checkpoint.
Great. Okay, again, you were going to be doing the heavy lifting, I think, so...
Yeah, and like when it works, and when it doesn't, it's incredibly infuriating. And then you have this pep system, so if you press down on the D-pad, it will engage your skill. Mine is stealth. And up on the D-pad gives, you just gave me a pep.
Nice.
Which works pretty well. So, right, we got some guys ahead of us. Let's run in here machine game style and see what happens.
Okay. Yep, level 20s. I don't know how much damage I'm doing to these guys, but I'll do my best.
Well, we'll know how quickly you go down, basically.
Oh. Nice. Up to level 3 already.
There you go. Well, maybe that's how they'll handle it.
I should warn our viewers that this game is extremely violent.
Yes!
Even more so than other video games.
Whoa, okay, so this happens in the game. We are now being surrounded by a lot of enemies. And we're kind of in...
Okay, I'm down to 39, 29. I need some life here. Plus 50 health, there we go.
Oh, not sure. Alright. So yeah, maybe we can give this YouTube title the, watch us
what about
level
this guy?
to 20 in 30 minutes. Oh, where are you? Oh, these guys, I hate them.
Oh, I'm down.
Okay, where are you? Oh, crap. Alright, oh, I am hurt now. Crap.
Oh,
See,
no.
this is how it all goes wrong. You can move around when you're hurt, although it doesn't really do an awful lot. Yeah, you see, now you're hurt again. So, this is kind of, yeah, this is...
Yep. Uh-oh.
So, we're not reviewing the game, but it's worth pointing out that this is happening to me playing just for fun also. And,
Oh, is it really?
It can be infuriating. You know, you can get into these runs where it just keeps happening.
Wow, there's so many enemies. And they just keep spawning over and over and over again.
And some of them are really, really intimidating.
Yeah. Okay, now I ran out of there. I don't know where you are.
The laser super soldiers are just, you know, oh man. No. Okay, so there's also a system where like whether the square beside their health is like empty or colored or whatever, that determines what kind of armor they have, what kind of outer shield they have, and just to theoretically use a weapon that matches that to take that down. So you can actually
interesting.
And I have to say that I played many hours of this game and just never bothered to learn it. And I haven't intuitively learned it, you know. So so we just lost a shared life.
Yeah, I couldn't make it back in time.
Yeah, well, but that's the thing. So, all right.
Well, but at least it gives you a chance to get back to somebody before you lose a shared life.
Yes, and I'm sure there are people watching who are like, "What are these guys doing?" John says he's played the game. I see no evidence of that. You know, but, you know, we're comfortable with ourselves. We can change the difficulty level on the video feed.
Oh, I'm not embarrassed at all. Okay, where are you? I used the turret.
Oh, excellent. Well done. And so yeah, the whole way through the game, they're constantly telling each other how awesome they are, and it's actually kind of. I kind of like it. Like, there's a very kind of like empowerment vibe going in the game.
Yeah.
Where the two girls are just constantly G'ing each other up, and you know, you do a thumbs up for the pep, and actually, it's actually quite charming. I think they did quite a nice job with that, and it gives the game a lot of personality. So whereas I can find kind of being confused by what's going on. Gameplay. Where's my difficulty? I'm going from casual to easy. That's what I'm going to do.
It sounds like a good idea. And I am upgrading my character and adding more armor. So, did that do it for that wave? Important. Did that do it for this wave of enemies? I mean, can we kind of hang out here?
We can hang out for a bit, but they tend to kind of suddenly turn up again.
Yeah, I was just gonna comment real fast on the architecture here.
Yeah, definitely.
You've got this looks like tram system that goes overhead, and then below that, though, you've got these walls that separate districts. But then otherwise, you've got a very familiar-looking Paris here with kind of the Art Nouveau style of signs coming out of the subway. And then
Right.
the same sort of style up on the buildings, you know, the balconies, etc. So really a pretty game, I think.
Oh, beautiful. And you know, they have the classic Parisian style balconies where at any point a Nazi's going to show up and shoot at you from the balcony. And like you say, you have these massive, ugly, imposing militarist walls, basically, they just block up, that are just, you know, interrupting Paris. You know, it's quite,
Yes.
it's a beautiful visual style. It does such a great job, in fairness.
Yeah. And of course, famously during the Nazi occupation of Paris, the city, this is during the Second World War, real history, not alternate history, Paris was largely untouched during the occupation and then also the liberation of the city.
Right.
But, you know, Paris itself, of course, famous for many different revolutions, French revolutions, the revolutions during the 19th century, and then kind of most famously during the Paris Commune after the Franco-Prussian War. And so this is a city that is kind of well known to having these moments where there's an occupation, barricades being set up by the military or by the people of Paris. So there's a lot of historical material to go off of if you are making a game based on an occupied zone, even in an alternate history setting.
And I've always thought, you know, from the start, I've always thought the machine games, Wolfenstein games, have done interesting things because I think they've really thought about it. So, for example, now we're in this kind of apartment that's kind of disheveled and looks like it's been torn apart. There was a portrait of Hitler up here on the wall around the corner. So there's some kind of, I don't know, there's almost like these quiet scenes of disruption, you know, like once you get inside the building, you can really see it. And even going back to, for example, their depictions or evocation of the Holocaust in the first game, which, you know, what a challenging thing that is. And I understand some people don't like it, and understandably so. But I don't know. I always felt they've always pitched a certain way, and they've gone for certain, almost like an understanding of the Nazi occupation. So even though there's lots of literal look like, I feel like they've really put thought into, like, well, how would it feel? How would people react? And how do we want to evoke the same thematic ideas? Like, so how does the horror of the Holocaust come across? Yeah. In a way, which is what their game does. You know?
Yeah. All right, well, let's keep playing. I'll follow you.
Yeah, okay, well, follow me, and theoretically we'll find where we're going.
I have to say I'm jealous of your weapon.
Well, I picked this, so we're leveling up a second ago. Leveling up's quite important in the game, so I can only carry this because I have I now have a trait that lets me do it, and I bought that with the level up points. So that's actually a big deal in the. Those RPG elements are actually quite meaningful in the game. Mm-hmm. Which is funny because in so many ways it's kind of a stripped down shooter experience is what they're kind of going for, you know.
I gotta say, you know, having played the previous two machine games, Wolfenstein titles, this open world, the upgrades, the kind of leveling up system, it's a bit overwhelming because I'm so used to the kind of stripped down first person experience that you get from just playing as BJ Blazkowicz.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. I remember hearing about the game before I started playing it, and I thought, oh, open worldy, little bit of RPG elements, like this kind of sounds like something I'd like to do. And it usually is. I just fried a guy with my laser cannon thing. Oh. Oh. But, like, you know, when you don't have one of these big laser cannons, these guys are a real pain. Oh.
You know, I'm surprised I can take these guys down pretty easily, even though they're 20 levels above me.
Yeah, there must be some kind of magic going on with the levels. Also, if you see a guy who looks like an officer, it's a similar system to New Colossus, where you do want to take those guys out early, or else you're just dealing with effectively endless reinforcements. And I think in this game, it's not so much that they're made endless, but that they are made more intimidating.
Gotcha.
Oh my god, there's so much action going on.
Whoa.
So you see some of these enemies are these kind of like Terminator almost style.
Super
the robot
robots,
soldiers.
yes.
Yeah, so they continue to play with the kind of what does Nazi super technology look like after 40 years of victory kind of thing.
Right.
The game also maintains that very 1990s style kind of loose, pick things up as much as you can kind of thing, which I even associate with.
When I, having played other shooters recently, I have to kind of remind myself, oh, I've got to hit a button to pick something up. Yeah.
No, I know exactly. It's kind of, I've been playing a lot of Destiny 2, and I kind of, it's because Shadow Key came out recently, and I know it's odd to kind of keep bringing it up, but if you're talking about open world or quasi-open world looter shooters, I feel like that's kind of has become the main one, and it's just different from this game. And in a way, this game is more faithful to its heritage as a Wolfenstein game, because it wouldn't feel like a Wolfenstein game anymore if you're just running around constantly killing everybody and just magically picking up ammunition, you know?
Yeah.
It wouldn't, you know. But then I don't know, maybe we're just old men, and in my day, you had to press a button to pick up a helmet, and that gave you 10 armor, and that was all you got, you know?
News that the Nazis are getting desperate. They just lost a big fight over the Strait of Gibraltar. They will lash out like cornered animals.
Too bad the rest of the world can get their shit together. We have won this war.
So it's interesting, they just gave us a little update there about a Nazi battle in the Straits of Gibraltar. And of course, in this game, the United States has been liberated.
Yes.
It happened in between New Colossus and this game. So it's kind of, they only really hint at kind of the geopolitical situation. It does seem that apart from the US, nobody else is doing much.
Right.
You see here some movie posters for some kind of interesting. Well, no, that's a recruitment poster. It looks like.
Yes, this is an army recruitment poster.
Yeah,
I did take four semesters of German in college, most of which I've completely forgotten. So let's move on.
Yes. Okay. So here, and again, here we're going to find a way to. We planted the car bomb. Let's get away from the car. Oh.
Oh no, that looks bad,
crap.
John.
Okay. Yeah.
That looks bad. But I gotta say, I do like the enemy variety in this. Oh, there's a drone too.
Yes. And also they continue to embrace the sci-fi component, like the sheer scale of some of them.
Right.
So, like for example, the scale of the mecha dogs now is.
Come back here.
Some of them are huge. Yes, thank you. I should be doing my peps.
Ooh, ow. Boy, those
And
drones.
now I have 0 armor, so I'm basically in trouble, but I wonder if there's armor inside this this train thing. And the short answer was no. Okay. So
How are you doing?
I'm hanging in there. How are you doing?
I'm doing great.
Yeah, again, this huge guy has a certain type of armor, and again, like I say, if you look at the bottom right of your weapon, you'll see.
Whoa, he just came right in there.
Oh, and I'm done. And I'm up on top of the pillbox.
Where are you? Oh, I see you. Okay, can I reach you?
Try and jump up. I can fall down to you.
Yeah, that might be the best thing. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
You got it?
My word. Oh, I got it. So for people who are watching, maybe haven't played the game, when it's in full flow, it's pretty great, honestly. Like, this is fun. If you can stay, I feel like there's this line, and if you can stay on just the right side of it, it is tons of fun. But if you've got just the wrong side of it, you're just dying constantly.
Yeah, it's a fine balance.
It's a lot like,
That's a fine balance, I think.
Yeah, well, it's just, honestly, the first half of New Colossus was like that for me. Where it's just like, God, I find it so hard to stay...
Oh, I'm down.
Attached here. Okay, oh, crap, now we're both down. Well, there you go. So we're about to lose the shared life and pop back up. Okay, you come and revive me actually real quick.
Coming.
We'll lose our last one. So I forgot. So one of us gets revived at the cost of a shared life. That's what it is. So.
Yeah, I went ahead and bled out, and then jump back in.
There you go. Yeah, and so now we're kind of in a camp, but it's kind of like the 80s vibe is kind of almost non-existent.
Right.
So one of the things I've been playing around with thinking about the game is, to what extent is the game trying to kind of say, yeah, the 80s and this kind of world that is resisting Nazism culturally continues to exist, because the Nazis are basically just devoid of it. They just continue to be further down the line of like mechanisms, and you know, it's kind of intriguing. Certainly the kind of the... Oh, I'm down again.
Oh,
you know, I don't know. So it's kind of something I'm thinking about, because this idea of Nazi culture is an interesting one.
Well, I think it's interesting because it kind of assumes that, unlike other instances of imperialism or occupation or empire, that the occupying force isn't somehow changed through the occupation. That, you know, the kind of Nazi style, this brutalist architecture and iconography remains the same regardless of the change in time period or the change in location. So that's strange, I think. But it does kind of fit with the art style and the kind of Nazi exploitation of this Wolfenstein series.
And as of my, there I am, I'll go down again. I'm down again, oh dear.
I gotcha.
So, thanks. So the, and you end up doing things like this where they don't seem interested in coming over here yet. So you do a lot of kind of hiding behind buses and things.
Yeah.
So, it may come into the game, but so far the game doesn't seem terribly interested in talking about collaborators, Vichy style.
Yes.
Basically, it's the Nazis and it's the French resistance, and there's no real... And I kind of think partly that might be a late 2010s kind of thing, where in the punch a Nazi kind of... So far, they don't seem to have kind of gone there.
No, I think that's true. I mean, I think, you know, what I've really found interesting with the kind of recent turn in society at large... Sure.
Yeah.
With society at large and the kind of punch a Nazi culture is that, and with the kind of general history of empire, imperialism, colonialism, is that we've kind of gone back to, in terms of our analysis of empire, we've kind of gone back to a first-generation nationalist perspective. And what I mean by that is that that they, you know, in the kind of early years after colonial independence, there was really a move to attack old imperials, to blame them for all of the troubles, and essentially to make it seem as though everybody was part of the resistance, right? And, you know, during the 80s, 1990s, we really had a move towards recognizing the role of collaborators in that. And I think, you know, recently, not just in wider society, but in historiography more recently, we've kind of moved away from that, where we've gone back to this nationalist perspective, a kind of black and white perspective of the past. And I think it works for exploitation games like this. Now we're both down. Yeah. So how can we beat this guy?
Left, so. Yeah, well, and this is, you know, so let's go back to the game. I don't know. I actually, you know what? I just got a good look at him. I have a skull beside him as well. So
maybe we should retreat.
I think we should retreat. Yeah, I think we're gonna turn our tails and run here.
There's this corridor over here to the right. You want to try that?
Sure. Just gonna grab some ammunition here on the way.
I would say
oh my god!
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, I'm gonna crawl in, and you can. Yeah. So.
All right, here we go.
And the game is like, the game basically doesn't. It's personal preference if you like it or don't, but the game will let you do that. The game will let you run into huge trouble and just come back later.
Bash your head against it or run away. Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
I would say I am particularly proud of us to hold a in-depth conversation about the historiography of imperialism and collaboration while also playing a
You know,
first-person shooter.
the University of Texas taught us well, you know. So, but it's interesting, isn't it, though? Because it's so, especially in the current climate, like you say, there's this return because I think there's so much energy, especially amongst younger political circles. There's the whole woke concept, right? Brings with it this enormous enthusiasm and this excitement and this energy of kind of like, you know, that it, in its positive steps can lead to activism in a really constructive way.
Yes.
And it doesn't necessarily leave room to kind of think about the complexities, and you kind of just. And I'm not saying that's wrong exactly. Here's a shared life container. Let's go and hold this.
Oh yeah, let's do it.
So it's kind of interesting, right? So, I mean, because they could have just had collaborators, and maybe they come in late in the game and I haven't got there yet, and they could just be, you know, awful and reprehensible and cowardly, you know.
Yeah.
But then, like you say, especially the exploitation vibe that's so strong in the games now, it just feels like they don't need to. I guess you know, the style is so confident and assertive. They just don't need to go there.
Right. And I think, you know, the kind of cultural discussion about collaboration, colonialism, etc., that happens in wider public doesn't bother me too much, but it does bother me in a historical setting because, you know, this kind of all-powerful, all-knowing empire that we see in something like Wolfenstein didn't really exist in the past. You know, when you are using violence in a sustained way to maintain empire over many, many years, it almost always fails, right? So you need some sort of collaborative force in order to maintain influence, in order to maintain power, and in order to avoid, you know, overtaxing your resources. So I think, though, when you're talking about a game or you're talking about a movie that depicts this kind of thing, it's more interesting to have just kind of this awful enemy that you can, and it feels more satisfying when you defeat something like that.
Right.
So I think the fictional elements, you know, the fictional stories of empires, you know, in these types of settings, alternate history settings, makes sense from a gameplay perspective.
Right, and to kind of get a bit, you know, I'm starting to feel really old now, but I think we can confidently talk about Half-Life 2 as like an historical, you know, document of the history of games. It's been that long. And that's is it O'Brien? I'm trying to remember the, you know, there's a human who the alien enemy has basically chosen as you know, you're going to be the Vichy leader, you know?
Yeah.
And he, even though it's kind of patently paper thin, he's presenting, in theory, the positive side of it. You know, make the best of it, accept it. We can profit from this. And then, I don't know that it would ever suit a Wolfenstein game. I would love it, but it might not quite work storytelling-wise. If you look at then what the reckoning that comes after liberation, where sometimes there's a lot of anger against those collaborators, and you know, how do you resolve that?
Yeah.
You know, in a place like South Korea, of course, Korea had the same thing. So I think we should pick a different area. It looks to me like Victory Boulevard is looking for some pretty grim.
Yeah, I'll follow your lead.
All right. Well, sure. I suppose we'll let's try Claude the Armorer now.
Okay.
He's in Little Berlin, which is the district in Paris that's supposed to be there.
Okay.
And of course, Paris was such a prize for Hitler. You know, it's one of the reasons it's untouched, right? Like they marched through the Arc de Triomphe, and there's a lot of kind of. It's such a huge prize for the Nazis.
Yep. And famous photograph of him visiting the Eiffel Tower. You know, his visit of Paris, very choreographed by Goebbels and the rest of the propaganda wing of the Nazi Party. And it was, you know, for the Nazis, it was a redemptive story, you know, after the First World War, and it was also kind of a attempt by the Nazis to take on the mantle of the old Prussian Empire, the Kaiser's Empire, which won the Franco-Prussian War. Famously, you know, the Nazis kind of trumpeted that as one of the historical Reichs of Germany, And so taking Paris, kind of repeating the feat of the German army of the 19th century, was a very big part of Nazi propaganda and their kind of self-conception.
Beautiful girls. I just want to tell you that you are doing so great, so young. But the fire in your heart is like nothing I have ever seen in my whole life.
So empowerment's a big thing in this game, you know?
Yeah.
It's like the vibe of the game, and it's so strange because it's a game that like we want to be taken seriously, but it's also incredibly over the top and cartoonish at the same time. So theoretically, the Nazis have recreated a little German-style neighborhood.
Oh, okay.
Although, you know, as you can see, of course, they haven't changed the buildings or anything. So it's just this kind of interesting thing. We've got a drone up here. I'm going to try and take him out.
So these enemies here in this zone just kind of randomly appear, right?
Yeah, they're kind of patrolling, but and they're always the same. So for example, there's a massive mech dog coming towards us.
Oh my goodness!
He's always here. You know, he's always like, you know, and so it's interesting because it's kind of set up that you could just replay similar areas and stuff. But how do I put it? The game itself doesn't really feel like it should work that way. I don't know. Like, Destiny's like that, right? Other games where, well, I want to go here and I want to fight this kind of bad guy and I'm going to do it this way. I don't know, it kind of feels repetitive in this game.
Yeah.
Which is unfair. That's unfair because it's exactly the same thing that you'd have in other games. And it might just be because I have such high expectations, or expectations driven by the previous games, which were which were a different genre. So yes, this guy's always here, and then they will respawn and here.
How are you doing back there?
I'm doing okay.
Oh,
okay,
I'm
we're
down.
starting to. So you can see this death mechanic really, it's, you know, you really forces you to kind of think, at least be willing to run over the other person pretty quickly. So you can't just run off and be two single player separately, or at least not
Right.
that easily. Oh man, this Panzerhund. The Panzerhund 2. Okay, there we go, we got it.
Uh-oh, I'm down again. And in a very
Sorry,
bad
where are
spot.
you? Uh-oh, okay. I'm gonna try and find you. Okay, I see you. Oh yeah, this laser.
I'm up to level 10, John.
Look at that. I'm telling you. History Respawn will become known for its gameplay guides and fast levels. I mean, that's one way to approach it, right? Like, your friend buys it first, you buy it 2 weeks later, and you kind of take your medicine for 20 minutes, and then you're the same level. You know, it's one way to do it.
That is pretty common. Did you take down that Panzerhund?
I did.
Wow, congratulations.
Yeah, well, that Panzerhund at like level 5 was such a pain in the behind. And at level 21, he's pretty doable.
Yeah.
Signal of an Enigma machine near
The conclusion there of the Enigma is kind of interesting because somebody who does the history of intelligence operations and information warfare, I teach the history of the Enigma and the breaking of it during the Second World War. And what a lot of people don't realize is that the knowledge of how to defeat the Enigma developed by Project Ultra by the British during the Second World War was kept a secret until the mid to late 1970s. And that was because a lot of countries, including a number of former British colonies, continued to use the Enigma to trade or to send encoded messages.
I never knew that.
Yes, and so the British kept it secret because the knowledge of how to break it was still useful, was still, you know, worth keeping secret.
Fascinating.
So it's not, I would say, for this game, it actually makes a lot of sense that they would still be using the Enigma machine. It's not just kind of a throw-off thing to say, hey, this is the Nazis, this is their machine. It's also kind of a way to say, hey, this could have potentially still been in use had they won the Second World War.
That's very cool.
Yeah. Historical tidbit from a Let's Play. How many times can you say that?
I must say, considering that we've both been dying this entire time, I think we're doing really well.
Sign off?
Yeah, let's do one more thing. So I've picked another mission, and it wants us to change area. So hopefully it'll bring us to a third. We'll do a third area. So we've done Victory Boulevard. This is New Berlin. Let's see where this is going to go now. Go over here and loot this thing.
It looks so normal, except for the Nazi stuff all over.
Remember the stories Daddy told us
Political
about
detention
how
area
America's
4, I
revolution?
guess. Let me see.
Okay.
Because it's the same here
Yeah,
now.
sure. Why not? We do that. So yeah, I mean, I have to say, although, well, let her talk here.
Detention areas such as this one were established by the General Lothar Brandt to imprison political dissidents from the low to medium risk categories. A warning against anyone who would be tempted to rebel. Voice even one critical word against the Nazis and you are sent here. After the Paris uprising, many of the residents have died or disappeared. C'est vraiment très, très
Très,
triste.
très triste. So it's as you say, Bob, as you know, this is a Paris that is just constantly under the heel, under the boot.
Right.
And the idea that would have lasted 40 years without any kind of a break. I suppose if you take the Nazis as a once in history ever evil, but
Okay, let's see if we can find that resistance outpost.
But I was going to say, I generally like there's some graffiti there. I like what machine games do. And when they succeed and when they fail, I just think they're just such a good example of, this is how to get engaged with history in your game. Yes, you can have the cool throwaway stuff, that's fine, but like really, I really feel like they've dove in and thought about it, like what is our alternate history going to be like?
Yes.
And then kind of gone from there.
Right.
If you can
know?
get
And
out there, at least
and you
it's
have to
just
think
best.
about it,
Most people never even
we do
try.
have this ridiculous Nazi exploitation
Sweet, Abby.
in this game and in this series that they've created, but at the same time, one of the kind of long-standing complaints about World War II games that include the Nazis, is that they kind of whitewash the Nazi past. They don't mention the Holocaust. They just focus on the Nazi military and
Right.
the German army, I should say, not the Nazi army. But this series is one of the first games to have some sort of depiction or nod to the Holocaust, which,
Right.
it is an exploitation game, but still, if you are a player who's maybe somehow unfamiliar with the Nazi past, with the Second World War, then that can be really revelatory.
Yes.
And I think it's a lead that some of the other more established World War II series, like Call of Duty World War II, has adopted. I think
Yeah.
the most recent Call of Duty World War II game ended in a concentration camp, which was a first time for that series. So I think it'd be a lot ridiculous that it can have some sort of positive influence on the way we depict history in games.
Right. No, I agree, and I think, for example, the first game, the New Order, had imagery around the use of ovens,
Yeah.
and I can understand feeling that was tasteless, but it was meant to be horrifying,
Yep.
and that happened. I think about this a lot when it comes to the slave trade in North America, where you get people on television, other places saying, oh, there were some of the slave owners were good and things like this, and I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding that these things really happen,
Yes.
because it just seems absurd, like the Holocaust. It's clearly horrifying, and I think especially younger people, some of the more graphic things that happen, you're just inclined to not actually believe they happened.
Yes.
It's just like, no, that didn't happen. That must be an exaggeration. But it's not an exaggeration. Some of the things that the Nazis did were just grotesque beyond belief. Mm-hmm. But they happened. So I agree, because I just think that it's challenging too, because this sounds like a cheesy old man thing to say, but World War II, this is going to sound very stupid. World War II is a lot further away than it used to be, you know.
Right.
And now we're at least 2, maybe 3 generations. Like, it's 70 years ago was the end of the conflict.
Yeah. And, you know, you and I grew up kind of immersed in World War II knowledge, World War II historical fiction, World War II history in general. And you can't assume that with current generations.
No, I mean, yeah. Yeah, and like neo-Nazis and these urban Nazis and stuff were kind of a joke to people our age, because like whatever, these idiots, you know, and they just like to hate. That's all it really is.
Right.
I think of, like, you know, the movie Marathon Man, which is a fantastic movie with Dustin Hoffman and Laurence Olivier, the 1970s. Is, you know, the plot of that movie is this guy is a Nazi. You know, like his old man was a major Nazi during the war, and you know, people were living with that memory, and now we're having, you know, the Holocaust survivors are starting to pass on and go to their rest, you know, and it's that's a big difference then, when you won't be able to go and talk to these people, like as we've been able to do for the last 70 years.
Yep, exactly.
So yeah, so I can understand the upset at some of the graphic stuff, but yeah, it's fascinating. So I've just decoded a floppy disk, and it's basically giving me directions to some kind of a place. So I'm wondering, oh, okay, so this is the co-op. So if you go and request the code, I'll go to this other machine and I will punch out the code.
Oh, okay.
That's how they do it, so I can generate it now.
Okay, I've got it. Oh, okay. Cool, 6516. Voila.
I like the little nod to the PC, old school PC style, where you need to know the code. Except you don't actually need to know the code, because that would suck. Because that wouldn't actually be as much fun as it sounds. If you're playing on a PC, I think it's fine. You know, in my day, we'd, you know, more in my day stuff, right? So.
Yeah, I know, right? I was gonna say, how many times are we gonna say in my day?
Yeah, I know. All right, so where are we here? I guess we are currently investigating the outpost. Is what's happening.
Oh, is that what we're doing? Okay.
I guess so. Yeah.
The silent outpost. Clear the outpost. There's a dog.
Oh, Bomb and Hund. I haven't seen those yet, so I guess they're dogs with bombs strapped to them.
Great.
We were just going on about the fascinating nuance of the machine game, so it started covering.
Oh, well, John, you can't win them all, is what I would say.
You know, never was a truer word spoken.
This is quite a big outpost.
Yeah, yeah.
Or am I in the outpost? I don't know.
Well, does your mini map have the little orange diamond?
It does. Should I follow that? Okay.
We should try and find our way there. I'm kind of finding you right now.
Oh,
yeah, but there's a ascending level. Actually, we're basically running around on the rooftops of Paris here. That's interesting.
And it's one of these Paris courtyards, which has got these kind of interior corridors that are open air. That's a very common architectural element in Paris.
Whoa. So the takedowns can be very brutal. So I just took somebody's flamethrower off them and then torched him with it. So, and here we are fighting in clearly an urban space, and of course that's history of Paris, right? Is one of the great examples of kind of, you know, trying to make these sociable urban spaces. Like in London, you have those little gardens, right? Those little green areas suddenly in the middle of the urban center.
There is a pinball machine over here.
You should get over there and investigate.
Called Elite Hans. Oh boy.
And you know, it's funny, and oh, that's great. That's an inverse of Wolfenstein 3D. You see it?
Yeah.
The artwork, that's brilliant. That's exceptional. And I guess playing into this idea, they would still be kind of all the youth-oriented stuff would still be kind of very militaristic.
Yeah, one
But
thing
clearly, this is somebody's house. You know, this French
one
flag.
thing that kind of bothers me about this depiction of kind of an alternate history 1980s is that, you know, especially when we were in the resistance hideout at the beginning, it seemed to have a lot of neon lights, a lot of graffiti, and some of
Yes.
the music was kind of what I would associate with mid to late 80s. It kind of seems like this depiction being set in 1980, it takes some liberties, of course, you know, with the idea of the 80s, but it does so in the sense that it takes the entirety of the 80s and kind of smashes it into 1980.
Yes.
And I think that's kind of interesting. I think that's fine, but I wonder, what do you think of that?
Yeah, well, I think you see it in other mediums as well, right? I mean, Stranger Things arguably does a little bit of that.
Yeah, you're right.
Stranger Things' whole thing is 80s. No, but I think it's interesting because, like, for example, some of the film posters you come across, they really look like, you know, John Carpenter, very early 80s style.
Yes.
You know? But then, yeah, you have, I mean, the synth stuff that comes later, I mean, 1980, the music should really be the punk that actually informs the new wave that follows, would be more quote-unquote accurate, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But then it's also interesting the way we think about decades. So, for example, if you ask me, of course, you and I both lived through the 90s, John, what do you think of the 90s? I think it's flannel shirts and Nirvana. But then somebody else would tell you parachute pants, you know, and
Yeah.
or maybe like Will Smith's music career. I don't. As late as 1993, in some cases, things look very, very 80s, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't think about it that way. So it's kind of playing into the same kind of a thing. I think what continues to interest me is that even if you're using it as a storytelling device and kind of arguing that the resistance is, you know, these things are still happening, you know, I get why they did it, and it's a storytelling decision, but you don't have new wave, you don't have synth music without punk, you don't have punk without a specific set of conditions in the post-war period. And if you look at Behind the Iron Curtain, which is the closest thing to this kind of totalitarian state we had in the real world, they're not producing those cultural touchstones.
That's right.
Not to say they're not producing culture at all, but they're not producing that specific kind of Western capitalist culture that, of course, was decried then as decadent by the communists.
Yes, and the type of culture that we associate with the 80s, right? You know, when people make a movie, when they make any historical fiction, that's the type that you usually see. You don't see one that comes from another culture, another part of the world. So
right.
It's interesting. Okay, well, what do you think? You think we've spent enough time with Youngblood?
I think so. I think there's no real reason I just kind of clicked on Little Berlin here for the mission, but I think we've done a nice little tour of 1980s occupied Paris, and we've seen all the horrors it has to offer. Very weird.
All right, well, John, thank you for being my guide and my wingman during us out online. We are at historyrespawn.com. We are also the proud owners of a podcast feed on SoundCloud. And we also have a Patreon. If you would like to support History Respawn going forward, please visit our Patreon page at www.patreon.com/History Respawn. Until next time, goodbye.